Have you ever felt like nothing's happening in your life? Like you're doing all the right things, but God still feels quiet? Maybe you're praying, you're showing up, you're reading faithfully, and yet it still seems like you're stuck in that period of waiting. And I get it. Waiting is not only frustrating, it's discouraging. But here's one thing that we often forget is that God is still moving and working in the waiting. And so today we're going to go over 3 stories from Scripture that shows us how God moves and works in the waiting period. Hi, I'm Andrew, and this is Right and Witness. Our first story from Scripture comes from Abraham. In Genesis 12, God calls Abraham, and he tells him to leave everything that's familiar to him. And he promises to make him into a great nation. But notice what God does not give Abraham. He doesn't give him a map. He doesn't give him a timeline. He simply says, go to the land that I will show you. And Abraham obeys. But what we often forget is that the promise took a long time to come to pass. It didn't take days or months. Abraham waited years. And during that waiting, there was doubt. The promise seemed impossible. And Abraham, at times, tried to take matters into his own hands. But through it all, God was there and he was present. And the waiting was not wasted, it was actually formative. And I think the same thing could be true for you and I. God may have given you a calling to write, to speak, to create, but he hasn't given you the full picture. Not the audience, not the timing. But like Abraham, you're invited to walk by faith before you ever see the fulfillment. God often reveals the calling before he reveals the timeline. And sometimes the waiting isn't just quiet, it's painful. The second example from Scripture comes to us from the story of Joseph. At age 17, Joseph is given this dream by God that shows him what his future is going to look like. But what came next wasn't fulfillment. It was betrayal. Joseph was sold by his brothers. He was falsely accused. He was thrown into prison. And then he was forgotten about. 13 years passed from the moment that Joseph was given that dream to the fulfillment of that promise. And there was a lot of pain in that waiting. And yet when Joseph looked back on that pain, he addressed his brothers and said that you meant it for harm, but God used it for my good, and he meant it for good. See, God wasn't absent in that waiting. Even though there was quiet, even though there was pain, God was still working, God was still moving. God did not forget Joseph. Joseph didn't just arrive at his calling, he was shaped for it. And for us, that matters. Some seasons feel slow, other seasons feel unfair, like our obedience is costing us something. But Scripture shows us that God is able to redeem the parts of our stories that were never supposed to happen. God is just as present in the process as he is in the promise. Which leads us into our third story from Scripture, the story of Hannah. Hannah's waiting didn't look productive or strong. It looked like tears and prayer. Scripture tells us that Hannah poured her soul out to the Lord while others misunderstood her. Some waiting seasons don't look faithful. They look broken. And Hannah reminds us that waiting is not just about being faithful. It's about being honest before God. But what may not appear as this great faithfulness is actually this quiet faithfulness from Hannah, choosing to trust God and cry out to him in prayer. If you're in a waiting season right now, Scripture reminds us that God is not distant. He's present, he's shaping us, and he's faithful, even when the story feels unfinished. Waiting is hard. Waiting is uncomfortable, and it's easy to feel frustrated, invisible, and even start doubting. So whether you're a writer or pursuing any type of calling, waiting can feel like nothing's happening at all. And you wonder to yourself, is God really here? Is he really moving? Am I supposed to be here right now? But keep holding on. Like Abraham and Joseph and Hannah, Scripture shows us that God is still moving in the waiting. He's shaping us. He's working in us and through us. And the waiting is worth the wait when we trust God and his timing. If this video helped or encouraged you at all, I ask that you leave a thumbs up, as it would help other people who are in a waiting season potentially come across this video and help them. And if these type of videos are helpful to you and encouraging to you, I ask that you subscribe to the channel, and I'll have more videos coming out soon. But until next time, this is Right and Witness, where we write faithfully, we witness boldly, and we trust God to use our stories.